I'll give you my bonus if you read this. Millionaire CEO laughed. Then the waitress read aloud in Latin. Before we begin, comment below and tell us, where are you watching from tonight? What city are you calling home? And when it's over, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. He held up the page like it was a joke. $1 million, he said, loud enough for the whole executive lounge to hear. If you can read this, the room erupted in laughter. Sharp suits, sharper egos, all of them watching the girl in the gray uniform. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She just reached for the cipher and did what none of them could. By the time she finished, the laughter was gone, and for the first time in his life, Elliot Vance, the man who built an empire on knowing everyone's value, had no idea what hers was. He only knew he'd underestimated the wrong woman. The espresso machines hissed like steam valves in a forgotten factory. The scent of burnt coffee beans hung low in the air. And on the 50th floor of Vance Holdings, time moved to the rhythm of money. Elliot Vance didn't believe in accidents or feelings, or the idea that anyone outside the boardroom could possibly have something worth listening to. He was 43, a legend, a man who could slice through financial projections like they were air. But when it came to people, he didn't see them. He measured them. To him, the girl who brought his coffee every morning. No sugar, always hot, wasn't a person. She was a habit. Her name was Clara Moreno, 29, quiet, efficient, invisible by design. She wore a cafeteria uniform, the color of fog, and a name tag that might as well have said, nothing to see here. But Clara noticed everything. She noticed the way the analysts panicked before big meetings. She noticed the whiteboards left scribbled with equations and the printed reports executives tossed like yesterday's trash. She collected patterns the way some people collected coins quietly, carefully. No one ever asked what she knew. No one ever noticed her eyes tracing the formulas behind the numbers, until the day a cipher arrived. A single page, covered in symbols, letters, patterns that danced just outside logic. No one could read it. Not the data team, not the cybersecurity guys, not even Elliot. It came from a mysterious investor known only as Minerva, a ghostly force who controlled billions and destroyed empires with a signature. And suddenly, the room full of geniuses couldn't move forward. They stared at the cipher like it was a joke from the gods, a riddle with no answer. That afternoon, Elliot passed through the executive lounge, furious, pacing and froze. There, at a side table, sat Clara on her break, with a napkin and a ballpoint pen. She wasn't eating, she was scribbling the same symbols over and over as if they meant something only she could see. He should have walked away. He should have laughed it off. But something ego, curiosity, or some strange twist of fate made him stop. He grabbed the cipher from his analyst's hand, crossed the room, and slammed it down in front of her. Well, he said, loud enough for every suit in the room to hear. Our coffee girl thinks she's Alan Turing. A few chuckles, one cough. Clara's face flushed, but she didn't back down. He leaned in. I'll make you a deal, Elliot said, smirking. Solve this, and my bonus is yours. He said it like a joke, but she didn't laugh. She picked up the paper. She read it, and then, softly, almost too soft for the room to hear, she spoke. It's a cipher built on stock market patterns from 1987, Black Monday. He's not testing your intelligence. He's testing if you remember what happened when the world fell apart. Silence. Real, stunned silence. And in that moment, as Clara handed him the translated message, the one none of his people could decipher, Elliot Vance realized he wasn't looking at a waitress. He was looking at the smartest person in the room. Chapter 1. The Invisible Girl. The coffee pot hissed in her hand like it was angry. Clara shifted her grip and poured another cup with practiced precision. No splash, no wasted motion. Black, no sugar. The man in the navy suit didn't look up as she set it beside his tablet. He didn't need to. They never did. Every morning was the same. She moved from table to table, her gray uniform blending into the cold stone walls of the executive lounge, her footsteps silent on polished floors. She was part of the architecture, functional, quiet, disposable. To them, she was the coffee girl. To herself, Clara Moreno was a ghost on purpose, and she had learned the hard way. Ghosts don't get hurt. It wasn't always like this. Once upon a different life, Clara had been the girl with trophies, first place in state math competitions, a scholarship to Columbia, a professor who said she could write the next great cipher theory of the decade. But life had its own variables. Her little brother's diagnosis came like a thunderclap, rare, aggressive leukemia, her mother gone, her father already a stranger. There was no one else, just Clara. So she left school, sold her laptop, took 3 jobs. By the time her brother passed 2 years later, her dreams weren't just on hold. They were packed in a box under her bed, gathering dust like relics. The job at Vance Holdings paid well, steady hours, health insurance, and no one asked too many questions. She kept her head down, did her work, became invisible by design, but her mind, that part of her, never turned off. She read abandoned whiteboard notes like puzzles, listened to hallway conversations like symphonies. Some people did crosswords on the train. Clara decrypted investment memos. She knew the company better than anyone realized. She could name the mergers they were about to announce before the press did. She could tell when the market would shift just by watching Elliot Vance's posture in the lounge. She didn't tell anyone, because no one ever asked. That morning started like any other. Frost on the windows, headlines about a mysterious investor named Minerva shaking up the financial world. Clara skimmed the story on her phone while stirring cream into the espresso machine. She liked the name. Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom and war. Someone important, someone powerful. Not someone like her. At 10, 14, Mahim. Clara passed by the executive conference room and noticed the shift. The silence was too still. Tension hung in the air like a wire pulled tight. She peeked in. Executives leaned over a long oak table. Elliot Vance at the head, his jaw tight. A single sheet of paper in the center covered in strange symbols. Her heart pricked. She knew that look, that rhythm. It was a cipher, not just any puzzle. A crafted one, hand-built, with intention. She didn't linger. She wasn't supposed to be there. But as she cleared the half-empty coffee cups, she couldn't help it. She looked just once, and that's all it took. That night, she sat in her tiny apartment, the hum of her old fridge, her only company. She drew the shapes again on a napkin, trying to find the pattern. It wasn't random. It was music, structure, memory encoded in math. She felt her heartbeat slow in that familiar way. When her mind locked in, when noise faded, the cipher spoke in silence, and she listened. She didn't know yet that Elliot Vance had seen her doodling at that exact moment, didn't know his pride was cracked just enough to challenge her. She only knew that something inside her was waking up, a part of her that had been buried beneath grief, poverty, and long shifts in a corporate cafeteria. Clara didn't need the $1 million bonus. She needed someone, anyone, to ask the question she'd been waiting her whole life to hear. What do you see? Because Clara had always seen everything. She just never thought anyone would see her. Chapter 2. The bonus. The lounge smelled like bitterness, burnt coffee, and masculine pride. Elliot stood near the windows, hands in his pockets, watching his empire stretch across Manhattan like a steel kingdom. Behind him, a group of analysts whispered in hushed tones. The cipher was still unsolved. 4 hours, zero progress. Minerva's message was a wall no one could scale. Until he saw her, Clara, sitting at a corner table, off duty, alone, not sipping coffee, not scrolling her phone, just drawing. Her pen moved in steady strokes over a napkin. Curves, angles, patterns, symbols he recognized. His breath caught. No, it couldn't be. She was copying the cipher. At first, Elliot just stared, his brain refusing to compute what he was seeing. Then something twisted inside him. Some mix of confusion, curiosity, and the ugly flicker of insult. How dare she? Was this a joke? A barista, playing at spy games. The pressure of the day had worn him raw, and Clara, unknowingly, had stepped into the path of his unraveling composure. He took the cipher from Ben's shaking hand without a word and walked toward her. His voice was loud, sharp enough to slice. Well, Elliot said, laying the encrypted page on her table like a challenge. Look what we have here. Our coffee girl thinks she's Alan Turing. The room turned. Laughter, thin and uncomfortable, rippled like static. Clara froze, napkin in hand, pen still poised. She hadn't even realized he'd noticed her. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't flinch. She didn't crumple. She just looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, but something that made his breath catch. Calm. He pointed at the page. Tell you what, he said, mocking. You solve this, and my annual bonus is yours. $1 million, he added, with a crooked grin. How's that for motivation? Silence fell. One of the younger VPs coughed awkwardly. Ben looked like he wanted to crawl under a table, but Elliot didn't care. He wanted her to back down, to laugh, to retreat. She didn't. She set her napkin aside, picked up the cipher, studied it, and for the first time in a long time, Elliot Vance watched someone not perform, but think. Her lips moved, her brows furrowed, her fingers traced invisible lines through the air, and then she looked up. It's a visionaire variation, she said, her voice soft but clear. But instead of a word-based key, it's number-based. The closing stock prices of the top 5 tech companies on October 19th, 1987. Black Monday. The crash. The executives blinked. Elliot's smile died. He's not testing your code breaking, Clara continued. He's testing if you understand why markets collapse and what kind of leadership survives it. She turned the cipher over. On the back, in quick, fluid script, she decoded the message. Elliot read it aloud, but his voice trembled. $1 billion is a tool in the hands of a fool. It builds a house of cards. Tell me, Mr. Vance, what have you built that will survive the next crash? The silence that followed was thunderous. He'd meant to humiliate her. Instead, she'd exposed the one thing he tried hardest to hide, that sometimes he had no idea what really mattered. Clara didn't gloat, didn't even look proud. She simply placed the cipher back on the table, stood with quiet dignity, and walked away, leaving the smell of espresso, power, and stunned silence in her wake. Elliot didn't stop her. Couldn't, because for the first time in a decade, he didn't feel like the smartest person in the room, and somehow that both terrified him and made him want to know everything about her. Chapter 3. The file on her. The paper trembled in his hand, not from weakness, not from fear, from something worse, doubt. Elliot Vance had built a career on certainty. He didn't believe in hunches or feelings or intuition. He believed in data, in people who made sense on paper. But Clara Moreno, she didn't make sense. She had walked through the fire of his arrogance and emerged not just unscathed, but quietly victorious. She hadn't just solved the cipher. She'd revealed him, and now Elliot Vance needed to know who the hell was she. He called down to HR. His voice was clipped, impatient. Pull the file on Clara Moreno, cafeteria staff. I want everything. Education, work history, references. He gave them 5 minutes. They took 3. The folder was paper thin, offensively so. He opened it, expecting to see some hidden credential, some sign that her brilliance had simply been buried beneath poor choices. But the truth? The file was ordinary. Community college dropout, liberal arts major, no degree. Previous work history, diner waitress, gas station cashier, barista. 3 years at Vance Holdings as cafeteria support. No certifications, no accolades, no glowing letters of recommendation, nothing. And yet, she had decoded something his million-dollar team couldn't even comprehend. He stared at the file as if it would rearrange itself and explain her, but it didn't. Clara remained an outlier, an unsolvable variable, a cipher. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking beneath him. The skyline outside glared in cold white and steel. Usually, this view filled him with power. Tonight, it felt irrelevant. He clicked on his personal laptop, an action he hadn't done in years. He'd stopped researching people himself when he became someone others researched. But tonight, he searched her name, Clara A. Moreno. Nothing on social media. But then something small, a 10-year-old PDF from the National Collegiate Mathematics Invitational. Winner, Clara Moreno. Category, Advanced Pattern Recognition. Age, 19. And further down, buried in the digital dust, a cryptography journal, a paper co-authored by a name he didn't recognize. And Clara, deconstructing the unbreakable. A new approach to polyalphabetic ciphers. He clicked, and as the text loaded, he felt his throat tighten. He didn't understand half of it. It was brilliant, dense, elegant, written with precision, and something rarer, soul. Clara wasn't just smart. She was a ghost genius, a woman who had once stood on the edge of something extraordinary and had quietly stepped away. Why? What happened? Why was a mind like hers refilling his coffee cup every morning? Elliot didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office, staring out at the glittering city, the cryptography paper still glowing on his screen. You can't assess someone's value if you never truly looked at them. He'd spent his entire career judging worth by resumes and results. But Clara shattered that system. And somewhere inside, the guarded man, the one who believed feelings were distractions. Elliot felt something stir, not attraction. Not yet. Something deeper. Respect. For the first time in his life, Elliot realized he hadn't just overlooked her. He had dismissed her humanity, and in doing so, nearly missed a once-in-a-lifetime mind. She'd cracked $1 billion code in silence, and now she was rewriting him. Chapter 4. The Ghost Genius. Clara stirred awake to the sound of a garbage truck and the smell of burnt toast, her neighbor's usual morning routine. She lay still for a moment, wrapped in the cocoon of a quilt her grandmother had sewn years ago. It was quiet, and yet something was different. She hadn't meant to draw attention yesterday, hadn't even realized Elliot Vance had been watching. She was just thinking, letting her mind wander where it hadn't gone in years, to patterns, to sequences, to the person she used to be, across the city. Elliot Vance hadn't gone home. He was still in the office, sleeves rolled up, eyes bleary, rereading every trace of Clara's name he could find online. It wasn't much, but what he found haunted him. He printed the journal paper she'd co-authored a decade ago, ran his fingers over the header, Deconstructing the Unbreakable, a new approach to polyalphabetic ciphers by Alistair Finch and Clara Moreno. Department of Mathematics, NYU. Unpublished student research. The work was brilliant, but also raw, as if she'd written it in the spaces between sleep and sacrifice. There were footnotes referencing obscure Roman ciphers and historical code breakers, names even Elliot had never heard. She was 20 when she wrote it. And after that, nothing, no follow-up, no thesis, no job offers, a single, blinding spark, and then complete silence. He couldn't let it go. This woman, who had dismantled his ego with 5 lines of translation, who had been under his nose for 3 years and never once tried to be seen. Why? Why would someone that brilliant vanish into a cafeteria uniform? He looked at her employee photo, low resolution, unsmiling. Hair pulled back. She didn't even look like herself. She looked like someone trying not to exist. "You're a ghost," he muttered. "How the hell did I miss you?" It was the last time she felt whole. She sat in a seminar room at NYU, her professor praising her paper, her classmates stunned silent. That night, she called her little brother and told him she might be flying to Geneva to present her findings. He laughed, told her she was too smart for her own good. 2 weeks later, he collapsed in the school cafeteria. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, stage 4. She never went to Geneva, never went back to school. Instead, she went home, took the night shifts, watched her genius shrink into survival. Back in her apartment, Clara made tea and stared at the cipher she'd redrawn from memory. These symbols no longer felt like code. They felt like a door. To what? She wasn't sure. But it scared her. She didn't want attention, didn't want charity. And yet, a tiny part of her whispered, "What if they finally see you?" Meanwhile, Elliot Vance stood at the edge of something rare, uncertainty. He wasn't used to this pull towards someone whose world didn't revolve around his own. She had decoded his cipher, but more than that, she had exposed a blind spot in his entire philosophy. That value couldn't always be calculated. That genius could wear an apron and refill his cup every morning. That maybe he had missed more than just a brilliant mind. Maybe he'd missed a whole person. Chapter 5. The proposal. The floor was quiet, just the sound of a dish towel wiping Formica. Clara moved from table to table, pretending her life hadn't changed yesterday, pretending that Elliot Vance hadn't watched her take apart a billion-dollar cipher like it was a crossword, pretending she hadn't felt the weight of his stare as she walked away. She thought, foolishly, that maybe it was over, that maybe she could fade back into the shadow where she belonged. But then, his voice, soft, controlled, but not cold this time. "We need to talk." She didn't look up, just kept wiping. "If this is about the bonus," she said, her tone flat, "you can keep it." "I don't want it. This isn't about the money," he said. She paused, slowly straightened. Her eyes met his. He was holding something in his hand, a printed document. She saw the title, Deconstructing the Unbreakable, a new approach to polyalphabetic ciphers. A. Finch, C. Moreno. Her breath caught. He laid it gently on the table between them. "You wrote this," he said quietly. She didn't answer, didn't have to. "I don't understand," he continued. "You have a mind like this, and you're serving coffee." Clara met his gaze. Steady now. Her voice didn't tremble, because minds like this don't pay medical bills. "Mr. Vance." A steady paycheck, even a small one does. He blinked. "My brother got sick." She continued. "I left school, took care of him. And when he passed, I didn't have the energy to start over. So, I survived." Her voice was calm, matter of fact, but her eyes held a quiet ache. "I never stopped learning. I just did it. In the margins, in libraries, on nights I wasn't too tired to think." Elliot stood silent, the weight of her story crashing into every arrogant assumption he'd ever made. She wasn't broken. She was the strongest person he'd ever met. The cipher from Minerva, he said slowly. It wasn't just a test of intelligence. It was a test of character. She tilted her head, curious. He wanted to see if we were the kind of company that could recognize brilliance, even when it didn't wear $1,000 suit. He took a breath. We almost failed that test. I almost failed. He pulled a chair, sat down across from her, looked her in the eye. I have a proposal. Clara folded her arms, skeptical. This isn't a pity offer, he said. This is strategy. She raised a brow. I'm creating a new division, qualitative analytics, a team that won't just look at numbers, but at the stories behind the numbers, history, culture, human variables. He paused. Let the silence breathe. I want you to run it. Clara's laugh was dry and disbelieving. Run it. Elliot, I don't have a degree. I'm a waitress. No, he said, his voice unshakably calm. You're the most qualified person I've ever met. You see what no one else sees. You listen when no one's speaking. You make sense of the things the rest of us miss. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. You'll have full autonomy, a team, a real salary, and one condition. She waited. You report directly to me. Clara sat in silence. She could hear the hum of the vending machine, the flicker of fluorescent lights above. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest like it was begging for permission. But her voice came out small, steady. Why? Why me? Why this? Why now? Elliot's answer was so quiet it barely touched the air. Because I missed you for 3 years. And now that I've seen you, I can't unsee it. Not your intelligence, not your dignity, and not the way you looked me in the eye when you tore down everything I thought I knew. He rose, giving her space. The offer's on the table. Clara, take your time, or don't. But either way, I meant it. You belong in that boardroom. Clara stood there long after he left, fingers brushing the edge of her old journal paper. She had waited so long to be seen, and now finally, terrifyingly, she was Chapter 6. The Department of Stories. The name on the door was still written in dry erase marker. Director, Clara Moreno. Below it, someone had drawn a tiny coffee cup in blue ink. Clara smiled when she saw it. She didn't erase it. Her first team meeting started not with PowerPoint, but with donuts. She stood in the center of the echoey office, cardboard box in one hand, coffee in the other. Rule number 1, she said, her voice gentle but certain. We do not start revolutions on an empty stomach. A beat of silence, then a laugh. Luis, the ex-IT guy, covering his mouth with powdered sugar. Rule number 2, Clara continued. There are no bad ideas, only ideas that haven't found their story yet. She set the donuts down. Her team young, overlooked, mostly hired as a favor or forgotten in old HR files, sat around her, unsure what they just walked into. She didn't look like a director. She didn't sound like one either. But somehow, they listened. Over the next few days, they didn't sit in meetings. They walked. Literally. Clara took them across the street to Bryant Park with notepads and coffee. They watched people, listened, wondered aloud, why did a billion-dollar merger fail? She asked one afternoon. Not what the graphs said, what the people felt. They read poetry, studied documentaries on cultural collapse. Dev brought in his grandmother's W-U-T-C-K letters. Raina analyzed the rhythm of TikTok virality as a lens for economic panic. Elliot watched from his office. Behind glass, behind silence. He'd created the department, yes, but she was creating a movement. 1 week in, Clara walked into a board meeting with a 5-page report. No charts, no spreadsheets, just words. A story. The merger didn't fail because the numbers didn't align. She explained calmly. It failed because we tried to dominate a culture we never tried to understand. We used contracts when we should have used conversation. The room was stunned. Wallace, the old school VP, scoffed. So now we're running a company on feelings. Clara didn't blink. You're running it on assumptions. She replied, I just pointed out where those assumptions failed. Elliot, watching from the head of the table, leaned back and smiled. Back in her office, Clara found a small note on her desk. They're listening, even the ones pretending not to. She folded it gently, slipped it into the pocket of her blazer, then turned back to the whiteboard and scribbled something new. If the data doesn't match the story, it's the data that's wrong. Clara wasn't just doing a job. She was shifting a culture one story at a time. She had once whispered her brilliance in the margins. Now she spoke it aloud, and for the first time, people were finally listening. Chapter 7. The stairwell. The building was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that made fluorescent lights hum louder and footsteps echo longer than they should. Clara didn't realize how late it was until she looked up from her notes, and the screensaver had long since burned into her monitor. 9:33 p.m. Everyone else was gone. Even the vending machine was quiet. She gathered her things quickly, shoved files into her tote bag, and headed to the elevator, only to find it locked behind a blinking red maintenance sign. Of course, she thought. Stairs it is. At first, it wasn't bad. Clara had always taken stairs. She liked the rhythm, the predictability. But by the 35th floor, her knees wobbled. By the 28th, her breath thinned. By the 23rd, she sat down, dizzy, nauseous, burned out. She hadn't eaten since noon, hadn't slept much in days, hadn't stopped working since she took the job. She leaned her head back against the concrete wall, cold against her skin, and closed her eyes. Footsteps, not hers, fast, heavy, purposeful. She blinked. Then he was there. Elliot, sweat on his brow, jacket gone, tie loose, worry carved into his face like a map. Clara thanked God. She tried to sit up straighter. I'm fine. She lied. You're pale, he said. You're shaking. Just tired. Haven't eaten. Forgot. I guess. She tried to laugh. It came out thin and brittle. He knelt in front of her, quiet, still. The man, who usually filled rooms with presence, now took up no more space than the flickering stairwell light. You forgot to eat, he said softly. She nodded. Looks like I forgot to factor basic human needs into my workflow. He gave a small, tight smile, then pulled off his sweater and placed it around her shoulders. What are you doing? She asked. Being your colleague, he said. A pause. Colleagues don't let each other pass out in stairwells alone. They sat there for a long time, just breathing, listening to the distant hum of the city through concrete. Then, you're working too hard, he said quietly. Look who's talking, she replied, voice softer now. He turned to her. You're trying to prove yourself to everyone. She looked down. Not to them, she whispered. To myself? That hung in the air like dust. I need to prove that I wasn't wrong to give up what I gave up, she said. That it wasn't a waste. That I'm still the person I was meant to be. Elliot swallowed because he understood. He'd spent years chasing a version of himself that never made mistakes. A man who never needed anyone. A man who didn't believe in softness. And here she was, brilliant, exhausted, human. And all he could think was, she is everything I never knew I needed. He reached up, gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. His hand lingered for half a second too long. The air between them changed, slowed, softened. Something unspoken stretched between them, fragile and terrifying. Then, the distant crackle of a maintenance radio. They both blinked, as if waking from a dream. He stood first, offered his hand. Come on, I'm driving you home. The walk down the rest of the stairs was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not lonely, not awkward, something suspended, like a beginning. Neither of them could name yet. In the car, Elliot didn't talk about the cipher, or the company, or her performance. He asked about her brother, her mother's cooking, her grandmother's favorite saying, her life. He asked about her. When they reached her apartment building, she didn't move to get out right away. He didn't rush her. She turned to him, eyes tired, but clear. I know what you're feeling, she said, and I need you to understand something. Before this goes any further, he nodded. If you tell me you care about me while I'm still the shiny new thing that fixed your problem, I won't believe you. I need to know you see me, she whispered. Just me. He didn't try to argue, didn't try to fix it. He just nodded. How will you know? He asked. I don't know, she said, but I'll feel it when it's real. She stepped out of the car, bag slung over her shoulder, sweater still around her arms. She didn't look back, but he did. Long after she disappeared inside, Elliot sat in the car, staring at the dark building. Something inside him shifted. The woman who had cracked his cipher was now slowly, impossibly, cracking him. That night, neither of them slept. Not from anxiety, not from adrenaline, but because a question had taken root in both of them. What if this is more than just a project? What if this is the beginning? Chapter 8. The distance. The rhythm had changed. Clara felt it in the way Elliot passed her in the hallway, shoulders tense, eyes a little too neutral. The man who once slipped her handwritten notes now nodded like she was any other department head. She felt it in her inbox too. No more late-night questions. No thoughtful articles forwarded. No quiet, "Are you okay?" in the subject line. Just, subject, Q3 report due Friday. And worse, she had started it. It had happened after the stairwell, after the moment when the air between them thickened into something fragile and human and real. It scared her, not because she didn't feel something, but because she did. And she knew what people would say. She was the girl who went from cafeteria tray to corner office after the CEO started looking at her differently. Even her own team was walking on eggshells, trying to decide whether she was a boss or a fairy tale. So Clara did the only thing she knew how to do. She pulled back. She worked longer hours, refused his coffee refills, kept her meetings with him strictly timed, strictly professional. She put up walls, but every time she saw him hesitate outside her office, every time he opened his mouth to say something and chose silence instead, her heart ached. Elliot didn't understand what he'd done wrong. One minute she was leaning on his shoulder in a stairwell. The next, she was disappearing behind polite emails and avoided eye contact. He wasn't good at this, never had been, but he knew enough to sense she wasn't just pulling away. She was protecting something. Maybe me, he thought, maybe herself. But he didn't push, because Elliot Vance, the man who once believed emotions were liabilities, was starting to feel something that terrified him. And what if he ruined it? What if saying the wrong thing sent her away for good? So instead of reaching for her, he defaulted to what he knew. He got formal, distant, controlled, and Clara mistook it for indifference. The hallway conversations were getting sharper. She was just a waitress last month. She's in his office a lot. Huh, I heard he gave her her own department just to impress Minerva. Well, I mean, she is pretty. Clara heard them all, and every word stung. Not because they were true, but because she feared they would become true if she wasn't careful. If people believed her job was built on affection, not intellect, then everything she had fought for meant nothing. She didn't want to be Elliot Vance's girlfriend. She wanted to be seen for who she was, for what she could do, not who she loved. One evening, she passed Elliot in the hallway. They both slowed, paused. A beat, Then, Director Moreno, he said. Mr. Vance, she replied. She smiled. Tightly. He nodded. Formally. And they walked in opposite directions. Two people in love, pretending they were nothing more than titles. They had cracked impossible codes, solved the puzzles no one else could. But now, they were stuck in the one algorithm neither knew how to fix. How to love each other without losing everything else. Chapter 9. The Intervention. The scent arrived before she did. Warm, savory, softly spiced. Clara looked up from her desk and for the first time in hours smiled because she knew that smell. It meant safety. It meant truth. It meant Grandma Rose. A moment later, the door to her office opened without a knock. There she was, 5 feet of Latina firepower in orthopedic sneakers and a cardigan, holding a massive Tupperware container like it was a peace offering or a weapon. You look like someone trying to solve a heart problem with a spreadsheet, Rose said flatly. Clara blinked. Grandma, what are you doing here? Fixing things, Rose said, placing the container on her desk, one empanada at a time. Clara opened her mouth to argue. Rose raised a hand. Save it. I'm not here to gossip. I'm here to interrupt. Before Clara could respond, Rose was out the door, moving with surprising speed down the hallway, straight into Elliot's office. His assistant stood up. Alarmed, I'm here to see the foolish man who is making my granddaughter miserable, Rose announced, not breaking stride. Elliot looked up just in time to see her drop into the chair across from him. Mrs. Moreno, Rose, she corrected. Now listen carefully, Elliot Vance, because I'm only saying this once. He blinked, actually blinked. The man who faced Fortune 500 boards without flinching was terrified. You, Rose said, jabbing a finger toward his chest, are a smart man, a very smart man. But when it comes to women, you are, how do I put this nicely, a complete idiot. Elliot opened his mouth. Rose raised an eyebrow. He closed it again. That girl in the office next door, she continued, voice softening. She's a diamond, but not the kind that shines right away. The kind that's been under pressure for so long. It learned to glow in the dark. Elliot swallowed. She's scared, Rose said, because she's been treated like glass, her whole life too fragile to matter. You know what happens when you treat a diamond like glass. He shook his head. It hides. There was a long pause. Then Rose leaned in, her voice quiet but firm. You have to be the one to tell her she's not fragile, that she's real, that she's not just the smartest person in the room. She's the person who deserves to run it. She stood, dusting off her hands. The empanadas are for both of you, she added over her shoulder. Eat them together. And for God's sake, talk. Then she left, trailing the scent of cinnamon and wisdom behind her. Elliot sat for a long moment, staring at the door, at the Tupperware. Then he stood up, walked down the hall, and walked into Clara's office without knocking. She looked up. He said just 3 words. Close your laptop. Why? She asked. Because your grandmother told me to feed you empanadas and fix this, he said, and I'm more afraid of her than I am of the SEC. She laughed. For the first time in days, a real one. He sat down across from her, opened the lid, and handed her one. We've been idiots, he said. Complete idiots, she agreed. They ate in silence for a moment, a sacred kind of silence. Then, I've been pulling away, she said, because I was afraid. Afraid people would say, I only got here because of you. I've been silent, he replied, because I was afraid you'd think I only wanted you. Because of here, she looked at him, soft, tired, real. So what now? She asked. He reached across the desk, took her hand. Now, he said, we stop pretending and start choosing each other. Every time, the office didn't need to know. The company didn't need to approve. But in that moment, over a desk, cluttered with empanadas and overdue reports, something changed. They stopped being CEO and employee. They became partners. Chapter 10. The answer. The applause faded as the MC approached the microphone. Tonight's final speaker is the director of our newest and fastest growing division, Qualitative Analytics, the woman who turned insight into innovation. Please welcome Clara Moreno. Clara stepped into the lights. A month ago, she would have trembled. Tonight, she was still shaking, but she smiled anyway, because now she belonged here, not because she'd been invited, but because she had earned her place. She unfolded the paper in her hands, but didn't read from it. She looked up, looked out. 3 years ago, I poured coffee for many of you, and most of you never asked my name. That's not an accusation. It's just how the world works. We're taught to look up, not around. She paused. But sometimes, the person who changes everything isn't above you. They're standing quietly beside you. A ripple in the audience. Someone once asked me why I gave up a future in mathematics to work behind a cafeteria counter. The truth is, I didn't give it up. I carried it with me. I solved algorithms in my head while waiting for the microwave to ding. I read cryptography journals in the break room. I practice listening in ways no classroom ever taught me. She smiled softly. I didn't disappear. I just got quiet. And now I'm ready to be heard. The room was still. Somewhere in the back, Elliot Vance was watching, not standing on stage, not holding the mic, just watching, and his eyes, those CEO eyes that once only saw numbers, were glassy with something deeper. Pride, love, always. Clara continued. This company took a risk. It gave me a seat at the table, not because of where I came from, but because of what I saw. And for the first time in my life, someone believed in me out loud. So tonight, this speech isn't a thank you. She smiled, eyes landing on Elliot. It's an answer to everyone who ever asked if I was enough. Yes, I am. Later that night, beneath the stars and far from the clinking glasses, Clara and Elliot stood side by side. No stage, no roles. Just two people who had walked through fire to find each other. You didn't say my name. Elliot teased gently. Didn't need to, Clara said. You knew. And the part about someone believing in you out loud, that was you. A pause. He looked at her, more serious now. Clara, this wasn't a company miracle. You built this. You gave me something I've never had in 20 years of leadership. You gave me truth. And you gave me you. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a tiny, folded napkin, the one she'd drawn the cipher on, the one that changed everything. I kept it, he said. It's the first time I realized someone could outthink me and undo me and make me want to be undone again. She smiled, tears in her eyes. He stepped closer. Clara Moreno, coffee girl, ghost genius, the woman who made me see the world differently. I love you. There it was. No bonus, no test, no code, just truth. She looked up at him, eyes bright. I love you too. And this time, no one walked away. In the end, she didn't need permission to matter. She didn't need saving. She just needed someone to listen and someone to stay. And Elliot Vance, he stayed. The city never stopped spinning. Stock tickers still blinked. Elevators still chimed. Deals were still made behind polished glass walls. But in a quiet corner of that glass empire, something far rarer had been made. A space for truth. Not just the kind found in balance sheets or business reports, but the kind found in a woman's quiet courage and a man's willingness to change. Clara Moreno never asked to be seen. She just asked to matter. And Elliot Vance, once the coldest man on Wall Street, finally realized that true vision wasn't seeing numbers. It was seeing people. Their story didn't begin with love. It began with dismissal, with silence, with an overlooked woman holding a mind like a supernova. But what came after was earned, not gifted, not rushed. Earned. One day, one conversation, one moment of bravery at a time. And maybe that's what true love is. Not the grand gestures, but the quiet realization that someone sees you, not just when you shine, but when you're struggling too. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this story? Did it speak to something inside you? Was there a moment that reminded you of your own life stories? Your first love? A time when someone finally saw you? Leave a comment and rate it from 0 to 10. And if you felt something real tonight, we'd love to share more stories like this one. Subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss another true love story. And before you go, don't forget to check out our latest stories. Click here to watch more now. Sometimes, the person you least expect is the one who changes everything. And sometimes, the bonus isn't money, it's being truly seen.